Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Bookum Nook Show. My name is Kyle Colley and this is an episode of Creators Talk Podcast, a podcast for book conversations with your favorite bookish content creators. This episode is brought to you by Bookum, the book community's new and best way to host dynamic online book clubs. Download the app and start your book club today at www.bookumapp.com. My guest today is the amazing Julianne Buonocore. Julianne is a former lawyer and the writer behind The Literary Lifestyle. With millions of blog readers each year, The Literary Lifestyle is one of the top bookish blogs in the world. She has been featured on the Today Show with Read with Jenna's Book Club, Buzzfeed, Glamour, and has even had her essay published in the book, But I Am a Gilmore. She is an introverted homebody, a classic style lover, mostly vegan eater, a fan of literary fiction, and an epic family sagas. Jules, welcome to the Creators Talk Podcast.
Thank you. That was such a nice intro. I think you covered it all.
Okay, if I miss anything, please let me know.
Thank you. That was so nice.
Absolutely. I would love to kind of get start with your blog, and it's one of our favorite blogs. So I'm curious to hear how it kind of started and some of the origins behind it.
Thank you so much. It's been so nice connecting with you and other people in your network over the past few years.
Absolutely.
The Literary Lifestyle started in 2019. And that was the year I got married. And the way it kind of all came together was I had been reading a lot in my personal life and writing book reviews. This was kind of before Bookstagram and all that. So I was kind of just writing them on a notes app that I have on my computer and on my phone. And I was also preparing for my honeymoon, which was in Italy. And it was the first time I was going out of the country. So I really wanted to make the most of it. And I was really nervous about planning everything and what everything was going to be like. And since I was reading so much, I was also making book lists for each of the cities we were going to and trying to read them to kind of like get a feel for the place before we went there. And then maybe like try to go visit some of the places that were in the books. And throughout the process of doing all this, over the year of 2019, I developed tons of notes on my phone. And then when we went to Italy, we were updating those notes with things that we really liked or taking things off that we didn't like. And, when I came back, I really wanted somewhere to put these that, people besides me could benefit from. And there's like this little like lull after a wedding also, because you've had this creative process for the past year. And then all of a sudden that little creative aspect of your life is kind of over. So I felt this little creative void as well. And that was really when it started.
Yeah. So how do you start to bring some of those cities in? Like when you're writing about them, what cultivates your writing there and what inspires it? Is it the foods, the culture, is it a little bit of everything?
A lot of things. That was really where it started, but it's really like gone in different directions since that time. So another like things that I was doing was at the time was, and still, like if there's a playlist for a book, I would be listening to the playlist, or if it was set in a certain time, I was researching that time to kind of get a feel of what it looked like. Or if there was a recipe, I would make the recipe. So it was sort of like a more holistic idea of combining literature and lifestyle. And travel was one part of it, but I was kind of doing it in all these other ways too, that I thought I could combine in a blog.
Yeah. So in your own words, how would you describe a literary lifestyle?
I would say it's that holistic mesh of taking a book and making it part of your life and taking things that are part of lifestyle and mixing them with your books. I also think, the way you said, I live a cozy, introverted, homebody lifestyle. I think that's really a big part of it as well. And I think a lot of people identify that with a literary lifestyle. And then the last thing I would say is I really think what I see in the community is people are very authentic, very open-minded, and trying to better themselves and be better people. So I think that's part of it as well.
Yeah, I think you do see it a lot just in social networks and when it comes to readers, the books that speak to them and the way they cultivate photos or the way they talk about them. It's just like really cool. And I love the way you do it through blog form and through writing. So I'm interested in a little bit in how you like do your writing process. How do you come up with your newsletters and your blogs and some of your best practices when it comes to blog writing?
So my newsletter is very different than my blog. The newsletter is really something that I look at as, an opportunity to just connect with people, and I can be as creative. I can do it any way I want to do it because I'm not chasing any type of algorithm. If I send an email, all of my subscribers are going to get it all the time.
Yep.
I can really do anything I want with it. And it's changed a lot over time. Sometimes it's been longer form. Sometimes right now it's a shorter form. Um, but when it comes to the blog, it's actually super, super technical. I basically run my blog on search engine optimization.
Oh yeah.
So the only way I could function as a business as a blog is to get a lot of eyeballs on my content. So if I'm not focused on social media, then the question becomes, how do you get eyeballs on your content? And search engines are a great way to do that. And so that's really what I'm looking at for my creative process is actually more, research driven as to um, what people are searching for, what problems they have, what I can answer, what's trending in the community, what's seasonal. So it's more driven at people who have problems and are searching for them through search engines.
Yeah, and I think you made a great point on two fronts. On the first side, when you talk about the newsletter, it is an audience that you more own. Every time you
Hmm.
talk to them, you're getting a full reach on that audience versus a social network where you may have a huge community, but it only that your content may have not have shown to this side or that side. So,
Hmm.
what is your thoughts when it comes to when it comes to that newsletter? Like, what are you looking for? Like, how do you write it? How do you make it? How do you change it each time you send it out?
I've done it different ways. And when I started it, I did it, the blog name is The Literary Lifestyle. So I did one part literature, one part lifestyle, and I would pick a theme and do something with literature on that theme and then something with lifestyle. So kind of just what we were talking about. Maybe I would give the book review and then a recipe that was inspired by it. Then I've changed it more into something that was kind of cool. Like I set it up kind of like a book. So I would have like an epigraph, which was, an inspired quote, then a little intro, and then I would call it the chapters. And chapter one would be new things. Chapter two would be things that were happening around the book world, and I'd kind of just pull in some of my favorite articles from the week and things like that, or big news in the book world that week. Part three would be like things that readers were currently loving, things that I was currently loving. It became hard to do it from a business perspective because it wasn't really monetized.
Yeah,
So now I've been working with a email expert,
yeah.
and his perspective, which has changed things a lot in my business, is to do short form emails that get people back to your blog, because really the only way I make money is if people are on my website.
Yeah. And so what was how's your like when you first started writing, what inspired you or what creative juice kind of started even like even if you're when you're younger or growing up, like
Hmm.
what really pulled writing out of you at a young age?
It's funny you say younger because I can take my blogging journey all the way back to literally being a toddler. Because I can still remember the first time I learned how to read and how exciting it felt to me. It felt like a superpower. And I remember, being really young and watching Reading Rainbow. And if you think about
Yeah.
it, Reading Rainbow is the literary lifestyle. It's mixing books and lifestyle. And I was really influenced by that. And then, it goes into things like, when I was in college, the internet and blogs were getting big. And I was an English minor, and I would take writing on the web classes and learn how to make a website and how to write on it. And then I went to law school, and I did personal blogging just as like a creative outlet, personally, just a very personal, private outlet, that it wasn't, even though it's on the web, it still wasn't, the internet was different then. I was the only one reading it, basically. So I can really take it across that time. And then before I started the blog, again, it was more like I was reading books and thinking about them. And it was like the only way I could really process this book was to write about it and kind of process those thoughts and emotions, because otherwise they would just eat up my brain all day. And it was before Bookstagram, so I was just doing it sort of on my own on this little notes app I had.
Yeah. And so then what ultimately prompts your topics for your blog?
Love seasonal things because it's also it's how I read, and it follows that whole literary lifestyle mentality that lifestyle is very seasonal. So I love things that are seasonal, things that are trending and popular. Like Fourth Wing was a really big topic
Yeah.
last year and still is. And luckily I loved it too. And so I could really immerse myself in it. You mentioned literary fiction earlier, and that always does well. I love literary fiction. And a lot of my audience does. So when I write about that, it tends to do well. I just did a Covenant of Water review a week or two ago, and I wasn't sure how it was going to do because the book's been out for a while.
Yeah.
But I think because it is that genre that I like and that my readers connect with, it did pretty well. So those are some of the things that I look for.
Yeah, and I'm glad you talked a little bit about your personal reading. Like, how do you prioritize reading when it comes to managing a successful blog and engaging with your online community as well?
I do it sort of the same way I did it before. And when I was working in an office prior to COVID, I would listen to audiobooks on my commute, and then I would just read a little bit at night. So I don't have a commute now because I'm working from home, but there are still like little pockets of time during the day where I'm maybe just like doing certain affiliate links on my website that it's not a lot of brain work that I can listen to an audiobook at the same time. So I don't have the commuting time, but I do have those little pockets of time during the day where I can still listen to audiobooks a little bit. And then again, it's just the same, like, at the end of the night to wind down instead of watching TV, I tend to go for a book.
Yeah, makes sense. And do you feel pressure when it comes to writing, especially with the size of the audience that you have?
I think I'd say I feel more pressure with reading than writing.
Okay.
Writing has always been really natural to me. The reading can be a little bit more pressure because I may feel like it's not, I don't always have the choice of what to read because sometimes I feel like I have to do it. Like it's Christmas, so I have to get as many Christmas books in. People want to know my thoughts on these. And a lot of times I push myself to finish a book when I really shouldn't, when it's just not working for me and I should quit it. And I did that. I'm trying to do it a little bit more because all of our time is so limited. And I think I can still not finish a book. I won't say the book, but there was one I didn't finish recently that I was really pushing myself, and I was pretty close to the end. And it's not a bad book. It was a celebrity book club pick. It was on Obama's list, celebrity book club. It sold a ton. It got great reviews. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think I still knew enough about the book at that point that I was able to say, I was able to walk away from it myself, but still say, I know exactly the type of person who's going to like this. And I can still recommend it to those types of people. Like it reminds me of this book, or it reminds me of this or that. I can still do my job and not push myself beyond what I should be pushing myself.
Yeah, we talked with Sarah from Fiction Matters on the Creator Talk, and she had a really good point about just yeah, I mean she was talking to Tracy on her podcast, but she was talking about how even those the books that you don't enjoy are the ones that are harder to read. That's a part of your literary taste is too. It's more of the I didn't like this book because of this
Mhm.
versus that, and I think it really helps the readers know and understand your taste and the vision you have behind your blog too.
I found that too, even before I was blogging. Again, I won't say any book names, but there was one or two in particular that sometimes those are the books you think about the most because you're like, and another thing, it didn't have this or that, or they got this wrong or that wrong. Like sometimes, like you read a book that you love, and you just all you can really say about it is, "Oh my gosh, I loved it." But sometimes when you read a book that you don't like, there's a lot of reasons why, and you're thinking about those reasons a lot more instead of just enjoying it.
Yeah, and I think it also can be hard as like a content creator when you get like free books and you feel an
Mhm.
obligation to start saying, "Well, I did get this book, so I shouldn't give it a 3 star, 4 star." Versus
Mhm.
when you go to see a movie or other pieces of art, you
Right.
kind of just look at it for what it is and say, "I
Yeah.
didn't like this because of this point or that point." So I think there is a lot of pressure sometimes being a reader or a content creator in the space to feel like an obligation to these sometimes even getting free books.
Yeah, I listened to your podcast with Sarah, and I agreed with a lot of what she said on that front. I personally have found that distancing myself from publishers, authors, and all of that has helped me maintain my authenticity and maintain objectivity. I don't really befriend a lot of authors because that can create a lot of like guilt and
Yeah.
pressure. And I didn't even use NetGalley until like a couple months ago. And now, even when I use NetGalley, which is a pretty open-ended thing, I can easily go on NetGalley and say I didn't like this or I had to quit it because I was triggered by this or that. Very low pressure situation. But I still try to only accept books that I'm 100% reading no matter what, versus a maybe. Because I found myself in sticky situations with those maybes.
Yeah, and I think you do a really good job, especially with your social media. Kind of to what you're saying is that ability to keep that distance. So it's really does seem really authentic when you read a blog from your literary lifestyle, because it seems like you're just talking about what you believe, right? Versus it feeling that it's being pressured to say.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, like how do you, when it comes to your social media, how do you kind of blend blogging and the writing there? Because it's a different format. So how do you think about that when it comes to writing?
It is. And for me, so blogging is my passion. I love the long form writing. And social media is blogging is also incredibly time consuming.
Oh yeah,
So social media is always kind of last on my list. So I really don't have, and it doesn't really make me money. So if I do it, it's mostly for fun. So it's probably more so at night or things that I personally like. But as in terms of how I blend it with the blog always comes first and social media sort of flows from that for me. So if I am creating visuals for my blog, then maybe I'll also share them on social media, but it would probably never be vice versa for me, just
yeah.
because of time constraints. Eventually one of my dreams is to have people help me with social media because that's
Mhm.
another beast. And there's also, because I run a business, I have like 10 different social media accounts. So it's not even just focusing on one or two. It's really like spreading yourself across
Yeah.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all the different ones. So I would love someday to have someone help me with that.
Yeah, and I think each social media has a different style, right? So for
Hmm.
writers, Bookum or X or Twitter rather, or LinkedIn or something sometimes lends well to writers versus if you're more on the photo side or the video side, then
Hmm.
Instagram or TikTok as well. So I think it's always interesting to talk to writers when they to see which medium works best for them and what they can pull out, because there's different short form content that is writing in its own form as well.
Pinterest works really well for
Yeah,
bloggers,
Pinterest.
and I'm going to try. My next on my list is to get into Facebook, and I actually do like Facebook because I still feel like Facebook, people click through and read articles on Facebook, and it also, to me, Facebook is not as addictive a platform as Instagram or TikTok, where I might go to check something on Instagram or respond to a DM or something, and 20 minutes later forget why I even signed on the first place. Whereas Facebook to me is a little bit more like blogging, and it's really just my perspective. Other people might find it to be addictive, but I kind of think you can sort of scroll through and see what you want to click on or read more about or not, and then kind of go about your day. So I like it for that reason as well.
Yeah, and how do you? So you're talking a little bit about monetization. How do you consider partnerships? It might not even be in the book space all the time, but how do you
Mm.
facilitate those?
I hardly ever do partnerships for a variety of reasons. One is time constraints.
Yeah,
Two is, again, it helps you maintain your authenticity to be a little bit separate. And I can still monetize through things like affiliate links.
yeah,
So that way I don't have the pressure of finishing a book I don't like, saying something nice if I don't feel nice about it, publishing it at all if I don't want to publish it, because a lot of times I don't like to say mean things either. Like I'd rather focus on the positive. So maybe I would just decide not to talk about it versus talk about it and say something negative. Um, and I've just found that to be to work better in my space, and for how I do it. And if I do partnerships here and there, and it usually has to be like 100% yes, for me to say yes to it.
Yep, that makes sense. And speaking of that, I want to go a little bit into community because we talk a lot about it when it comes to book clubs, and you have a book club yourself, the Rory Gilmore Book Club. Can you talk a little bit about the Gilmore Girls, the impact it's had on your life, and also the larger book community?
Sure. So this was the most surprising part of my blogging journey, but I'd say it's the most impactful. I think it still falls into that literary lifestyle component because it's blending books with TV. The way I got into it was during COVID. Um, my sister was really a Gilmore Girls super fan back in the early 2000s, and I only watched it either with her or because it was on in the house. I wasn't really going through every episode and I wasn't a super fan like she was. So I was familiar with it, but not to any degree of super fandom. And during COVID, a lot of people were talking about it and saying, we got back into the show. It's on Netflix and it makes you feel cozy and good. And at the same time, it was around fall when people really start watching it again and
Oh
talking
yeah,
about it again. And fall is also the time where you start thinking about what do I want to read next year? And I was thinking about how, in the early 2000s, I was in school and I was starting my career and I really wasn't reading that much for pleasure at that time.
yeah.
But there were all these books that came out during that time that were really popular books that I never got to read. And I sort of like blended the two where I thought, oh, there's all these books mentioned on the show. Maybe I can do it that way. Maybe I could watch the show and read the books that were mentioned on the show. And I mentioned it very casually on Instagram, and I never got so many comments. And luckily for me, I listened to that. And that's one of those things like as a business owner, it's not always about what you want, it's about what readers want. So I'm glad I listened to readers connecting with that because it ended up being so impactful for me and for readers and for helping me connect with people who are just like me. Because a lot of people who watch the Gilmore Girls are also that cozy introverted homebody, people who like literary fiction, people who like to go back to the classics. So it's been the most impactful thing and the most surprising at the same time because I never set out to talk about Gilmore Girls. It just sort of came about naturally.
Yeah, I say it a lot on this podcast, but like, what's most personal is most general. And I think
Mhm.
when you're talking about when you shared it out, you're just like, oh, I love this TV show, and then you send it out, and people are like, oh, this is, and also the fact that it has so many, like you said, so many books and references. It's almost like a
Mhm.
perfect timepiece for the book community. I think that is a lot of reason why you see a lot of gravitation to it as well.
Yeah, it's been great. I hear from people all around the world. And I also hear from people who are studying English. I hear from people who are doing English as their second language and trying to learn English by watching the show and reading these books. I hear from generations of women who, people my age who say, now I'm watching it with my daughter and reading the books. So it's been impactful in so many ways and on so many levels, not just for me and my community.
Yeah, so since starting the book club, how have you been able to engage with your community and build community, or what's even your thoughts when you hear the word community?
Um, for me, community has been, I don't want to say easy because nothing's easy in business, but because people are so passionate about this show and what it's meant for them, it's easy to get people excited and motivated and engaged with it. It almost feels like anything you say or do, people just gravitate to it and love it. And that's not me, that's the show. I'm really just a facilitator. And I guess my part of it is keeping people motivated, keeping people going, giving them high fives and saying great job, or helping them. If people are saying, oh, I'm going to pick up Anna Karenina this month, and I know I've got to reply to them and say stick with it, here's some tips. So I'm really just a facilitator in that community regard.
Yeah, has there been any like favorite moment or memory that's popped up from facilitating the book club?
The best is for me, the things that I mentioned, like hearing from people from around the world. It never ceases to amaze me how far the show and books have reached and continue to reach, and how many people it impacts, and different types of people and different generations of people, and people learning in different ways, and people studying the classics this way. um, you know the classics are important yet difficult to motivate people to read, and this is a good way to get people reading them and get people excited about reading them.
Yeah, stories, change lives. They impact you in ways that are so unique. And you never know, even if you're, as you said, it could be a classic book that speaks to you, or it could be a romance book, or it can be a nonfiction. There's so many books that once you really start to get out there and you see them, that's why community is so important, in the sense of there's people that are talking about these books that may change your life. So I'm speaking of that, I kind of would love to talk about your book taste. And what are some of what's the last book, the book you're reading now, and the next book you're reading?
So I think I'll cheat a little bit.
Oh yeah, no worries.
Um, my last book I haven't finished yet, but I'm about to finish it. And it is an advanced copy of Emily Henry's new book,
Oh,
Funny
cool.
Story. I thought it would be interesting to talk about, even though I haven't finished it yet, because it's new. It's going to be super hot this spring and summer. It comes out later this month. I'm doing it through Libro FM as an advanced audio copy, and her books have sort of been like, I am more literary fiction, so I like the romance, but not as much as like her best fans.
Yeah.
So they're always sort of in the middle for me. But this one I'd say is one of my favorites of hers. It's
Oh,
just really fun and light. I think people are going to love it, whether they like her books or not. It feels like an escape. So I definitely think that's going to be a hot book this spring and summer. Currently reading for the Rory Gilmore Book Club, we're doing classics this month.
okay.
And I picked The Grapes of Wrath because it's been on my list since high school. So, and I committed myself, one of my goals this year was to read big books. And that's a bigger book. So I thought it checked off both of those things. And then I'm also reading A Court of Thorns and Roses.
Okay.
And I'm loving it so far. I had no idea that I was a fantasy person until I read Fourth Wing last year. And that's another thing that just feels so escapist. I can just like go right into this world of fantasy and escape from reality. So I've been loving that. Um, Next, I have to look at my list. I know what I'm going to read next. James. And I heard you talk
Okay.
about that on
Yeah.
another podcast too. That was one that surprised me. I heard about it, but I didn't know how popular it was going to become. And when I checked the bestsellers for last month, it sold like crazy.
Yeah.
And I had an advanced copy of that as well. So I thought, I'm going to push this up on my list. And it also, James is a retelling of Huck Finn from Jim's perspective. So it also blends with the Gilmore Girl challenge this month to read classics. I can talk to readers about reading Huck Finn and pairing it with that.
Yeah, I think it'd be really cool to be just a part of a book club that reads all three of those books, and then like, because now that there's that new James story, it's kind of like gonna be interesting to see how they all intertwine and what makes it unique. Would you say like Emily, what would be your comparison for Emily Henry when it comes to like, would you say she's like a Nora Ephron or anything like that,
That's
or
a really good way to say it. Yeah, I think
okay?
I'd say so. Yeah, I think she's great. It's just that romance isn't always my preferred genre, so that's the only reason why her books can tend to fall in the middle for me. But I love this one.
Yeah, and then so you read about 100 books per year.
Yeah,
What?
a little bit
Yeah.
more than that.
Okay. And then what's your reading schedule like, and what's your best advice for reading that many books, or just reading in 2024?
Um, so I'd say it's different advice for reading a lot versus reading in general.
Yeah.
For reading in general, I think a lot of people just really need to get over that hump and just get started. I think it can be intimidating like anything new. Um, I think a lot of people want some great space of time to sit down and start their reading life. And I think life just doesn't really happen that way. And sometimes you just have to pick up a book and start. And I often tell people, to commit to just 5 pages a day, because I really do think that sometimes getting started is the hardest part. In terms of reading 100 books a year, I think audiobooks are really crucial for that for me, because I can do it while I'm multitasking and I can do it at higher speeds. I usually listen at a 2.0 speed.
Yeah.
Um, and I can do it when I'm doing dishes. I can do it when I'm folding laundry. I can do it when I'm getting ready. So it helps me find time where it doesn't otherwise exist during the day. So that's a really big part of reading a lot. Um, yeah, I'd say that's it.
Yeah, and then one thing I enjoy closing out these interviews with is what do you want, what would you like to see more of in the book world, and what would you like to see less of in the book world?
I definitely have answers to those questions. So I'll start with what I'd like to see less, and it's book bans.
Hmm.
It's a hot topic this year, and I think it's misconstrued. I think the way it's often presented is they're inappropriate books. And that's really not what these books are. They're age appropriate books that have been determined to be age appropriate for teens or children of this age. And I also think it's misconstrued as that these books are being forced upon students, and it's really not. It's about making them accessible in the library if they want them. Um, so the numbers on book bans have gone up more and more and more each year, the past few years, and it's astronomical how much it's gone up. So that's really what I'd like to see less of in the book world. In terms of what I'd like to see more, across the board, I'd like to see fairer wages. And I realize that's an incredibly big statement. And I know this is not an easy task, and I don't have the answers for it. And I know it's hard for other people to have the answers for it too. But I know from my perspective, and I've heard from people who work in book publishing, I've heard from authors, it's kind of all around across the board. Um, that it's an industry that's underpaid. And so not only does it hurt the people who are already in it, but it hurts people from getting into it. And a lot of times those are voices that are already being silenced. And we want more access for more people to be able to do this as a career and to be able to support themselves.
Yeah, very well said. As we wrap up, please let us know how we can support or anything that's upcoming in your life or anything that we should check out.
I think the best way to support is by subscribing. If you go to the literarylifestyle.com, there's an array of sign up options. And that's really the best way, because I make sure the email subscribers get the best and most important information. And, going back to, it's not subject to an algorithm. Whereas if you follow on social media, maybe you'll see one or two posts once in a while. If you're on email, you're going to get the most important stuff 100% of the time.
Thank you so much, Jules. We'll make sure to put all your information in the bio. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Have a great one.